to have a transformative, if you will, transfigurative experience? I think you can have it in a lot of ways. Talk to some of our people who greeted our guests and our visitors during Room at the Inn, what some of their experiences were. And I've talked to people who, had a spiritual experience and a transfigurative experience greeting a new grandchild. I also have a couple of friends that I worked with at the telephone company who had taken a trip to Rome. And they got to see the Vatican, and they saw St. Peter's Basilica, and they saw the Sistine Chapel, and they were in awe, and they said they felt God's presence. And they came back transformed and changed. Then I had a neighbor, a young man about 22 years old, who was married, had a small child, and was a bull rider. He got hung up on the back of a bull one time and was knocked unconscious and stepped on and had several severe injuries and was rushed to the hospital. And I saw him later, after he'd gotten out of the hospital, outside his front yard. And I walked over to see how he was feeling. And he said, "Well, I'm really good." But I said, "Well, we kind of got where we were talking about faith." And I said, "Well, tell me what the experience was like for you." And he said, "Well, I can tell you I met God in 8 seconds. On the dirt of a rodeo arena floor." And he said, "My experience was really strange," because he said, "I wasn't worried about the bull." He said, "I didn't even know what was happening. But he said, I saw this light and I felt these hands and this presence care for me." Now, shortly after this, he retired from bull riding. He was 25 years old. But he went to school. And he became a minister. And even though our faiths are very different, he's a minister with the Cowboy Church of America. And he drives, or was, driving around the country to rodeos, sharing the message of God with rodeo performers. His life was transformed. Now, what all these stories in common, or share in common, is the fact that every one of these people was open in some way to God's presence. They were open to the fact that God could care for them, or could speak to them, or share with them, or they were following what God told them to do. And I think that's important, because just like pilgrims going to a monastery who are following the most inward yearnings of their heart to have a deeper experience with God, they were open as well to God's presence in their lives. And we can share in that experience. We can share in that experience. All we have to do is be open to God's presence in our lives. To leave the hustle and bustle behind. And maybe that's what the mountains do. Because we leave the hustle and bustle of life behind. And we go to a place where we can focus on nothing more than God. When we can focus on nothing more than the experience. Think about that. Leaving the TV behind. Leaving your job behind for a while. Maybe leaving family cares or illness behind for a while. Because when you have an opportunity to focus on that presence of God, without those interruptions, maybe you can hear the voice of God speak. Now you say, well, okay, I've already done that, and I've had no similar experiences. But see, that's the other part of it. We don't get to call the shots when that experience happens. We just have to be open for it. Because the experience comes in God's time. It comes when God knows that we need a pick-me-up or a challenge. It comes when God knows that we can hear and listen. So that experience might happen here, in this room. That experience might happen as you walk out the door. Or you celebrate a special birthday. Or you care for a sick and aging parent. Maybe that experience happens when you take a trip. But it can happen if you're open and aware. Now we're getting ready to enter into Lent. Tuesday night we have our Shrove Tuesday pancake supper. Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and Lent starts. So as you go into this Lenten season, when it's a time of reflection and a time of examining your faith and your relationships with God, it's also a perfect time to maybe figuratively or literally go to the mountain. Maybe it's time to shut out all of those things so you can focus. Maybe it's time to go to a prayer group. Maybe it's time to do some spiritual journaling or reading some scripture. Or maybe it's time to spend a little more time with friends and family and those people that you feel closest to. Or maybe an aging parent or an aging child or a sick child. Whatever you can do to bring you a connection to God is what you need to do. That allows you to open yourself up to the experience. Now, I don't know if that experience will happen. What I do know is that the choice is always ours. The choice is always ours. We can open ourselves up to the opportunity for incredible joy and transformation in choosing Christ. Or we can be stuck. We can stay stuck. Or maybe we don't hear the simple voice that's calling to us, because sometimes that voice isn't always loud. So the question is, what will you choose?